Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foiled Fox. Thanks for joining me today. Today's card is a little bit different. You might think I lost my mind, but I really didn't. These are abstracts and they're great for male cards, guy cards, boy cards. They can be unisex, of course, but they work particularly well for men. So I'm going to start out with a card panel that's 6.5 by 4 with a foam backing that fits in the back, and then a card base that when folded is 7 by 4.5. And then I'm applying with this panel some joint tape. This is self-adhesive joint tape. You get it at a hardware store, Amazon. You can click down below and go to the supply list and it'll show you exactly what it is. And then I've got some opaque texture paste by Ranger and a palette knife, and I'm just adding little bits of it here and there. It's quite random. I don't want to cover the whole thing, but you can see how great this tape is. It doesn't move around. It doesn't leave any residue onto your paper when you peel it off, and you can peel it off right away when it's wet. So you can see here I'm peeling it off in real time. This is still wet, and yet it comes off so beautifully. So now that I have this really nice texture on the paper, it's a tone on tone. I really like that look. It just gives a little extra pop to your card. I'm going to set that aside and let it dry. But I have some rectangle and circle dies by Hero Arts. You don't have to have rectangle dies. You can just use the circles. And then I have some hole punches. I have 2 of them, 2 different sizes to make some tiny holes. And then I'm just showing the papers I'm using. That's Pool, Slate, this is Fuchsia, Mulberry, and then Evergreen. In truth, I just used scraps of these, but I just wanted to show you the colors. You can use any color scheme for this, which is so great. And I just cut a bunch of rectangles and a bunch of circles out of each color, much less of the pink because I thought that I'd spare my husband to have too much pink there. Since his favorite colors are gray, black, and red, I really wanted to do something a little bit different. I was kind of tired of that. And then with 2 of the smaller circles, I took the smallest circle after I cut out the circle of the mulberry and of the pool, and then I took a bite out of the pool colored one and made a half moon, and then made an off center circle in the center of the mulberry one. And then you can see I have a bunch of little hole punches there, and then I have embossing powders. These I've chosen are embossing powders with glitter. They're quite chunky. The chunkier the better. So I have metallic silver, fairy tale, raspberry Kool-Aid, stratosphere, and I think I had Turkish Nights out there too, but I chose not to use it. And so now I'm just going to arrange all of these little pieces that I have, and I decided that those rectangles were a little bit too long, so I'm just going to trim those off, and these are kind of my basis. And now I think I'm going to take the rounds, and I'm going to just kind of make this meandering path going upwards. So I'm swimming upstream with my circles here, and I'm just kind of creating the design on the fly. That's the fun thing about it. And I ended with the half moon. I thought I really liked that. I did not like that little rectangle though, so I'm going point to point diagonally and then cut this slender triangle, and I like that a whole lot better. Then I will add some little dots to this, just to here and there, just to get an idea. I do have a picker-upper here to aid with that. And I'm just putting them very randomly. Again, this is just kind of whimsical, abstract. But the beauty is you can choose any shape, any color schemes that you like, and you can make a card in a hurry, and you have very little supplies. You just need some embossing powders and really some circles. I did do some some triangles in the other card, and I'll show you that. You saw me real quick. I just wanted to point that out, that I may take a picture of how I had it laid out, because I'm going to have to take this apart, and I want to be able to get it back the way I had it. So I put some Versamark ink onto the largest panel, and I have some clear embossing powder, and I'm heat embossing it. Now I'm going to show you the heat embossing here, but I'm not going to show you where I actually melt each one of them, because you know how to do that. But I wanted to show you in the very beginning. And you see that I'm using the dowel because it really helps. It helps me hold it, get the embossing powder on there without burning my fingers or sticky or any of that. So I clear embossed it, and now I put a little more Versamark ink on it for a second coat and added some of that metallic silver. And then I'm going to heat emboss that. Now I'm going to heat emboss it just enough to where it's just starting to melt and it will stick, because I want to keep as much chunkiness as I can. Now if you wanted more, you could just put a little bit more Versamark for a third layer and put a little bit more of the embossing powder on there and heat emboss it. So I'm going to go and do also the other rectangle, so that I can kind of build a basis of this. But first I'm going to do some of these circles. These I'm clear embossing just like before. This is clear embossing. Now some of them are just going to be clear embossed, and others are going to, I'm going to add that extra layer of the chunky embossing powder. I'm not, as you noticed, I didn't show you here. I stamp it, add the embossing powder, and then you see it go away for a second, and that's where I'm heat embossing it off camera. But I'm going to add just a little bit of the sprinkle of the stratosphere here. And that's the other thing. You can just take a pinch and put it on there and kind of tap it down slightly so it stays on. Now I heat embossed it and I wanted a little bit more, so this is the third layer I'm putting on. And I just continue doing all these little pieces exactly the same. Sometimes, like this one, I'm just going to add some sprinkles, heat emboss it, and see I didn't get enough, and so I'm adding a little bit more. And when they're little like this, you can just put it right into the jar. Here I'm adding a few little sprinkles, and there is heat embossed. The dowel trick, it works so great. It's just double stick tape at the end of a dowel, and it just saves so much. Can't tell you how many times I've burned myself. So this is self-preservation, to figure out how to do it without burning myself, and especially for a project like this where you're doing so many pieces that you're heat embossing. But it's really no more complicated than that. The heat embossing does give a really nice sheen to the card. I toyed with doing some that didn't have the embossing powder on it, but it didn't turn out as nicely as I liked, so I decided to do them all in clear, and then some of them will get that extra layer or two of the chunky colors. So here's the clear layer, all heat embossed. And we're almost to the end here, which is great, because I left it all in here just because I wanted, I didn't know quite where to stop, and I wanted you to see the whole process. But it doesn't take very long at all to do. And if you don't have, your cards there, you're all ready for Father's Day or for a birthday and you need one in a hurry, this is a great way to do it. It was a lifesaver for me. And then I really wanted this moon to be really covered with a lot of shiny, sparkly embossing powder. And so with all those pieces done, I'm taking the foam, a foam sheet that fits behind this panel that we textured earlier, and I'm applying that to the back, and now I'm going to put some more double stick tape on here, and then I'm going to add that onto the card base. With that all in place, I'm going to start by putting some foam tape behind each of these pieces, or nearly every one of them is going to get that. In some cases, for the smaller pieces, I either glued them straight on or I let them go a little bit lower just to add some dimension. But again, I'm just kind of doing the fundamentals in there so that I can start to build my design again. And I have that picture that I took earlier when I did the design first, and I refer to it off and on just to make sure that I'm getting it in the relatively the same place. I decided I needed to heat emboss some of these little guys. I'm using a very small dowel now. I have all sorts of different sizes of dowels because it depends on what piece I am heat embossing and which one I want to use. These little ones I actually put white satin pearl embossing powder, and it made it kind of cloudy. I'm going to go with it, but I don't know that I would do it again because it did really change the color, and I did like that evergreen color. I like the pink in this too. It's just it's a little bit of pop and whimsy to it, and you know, I think he can roll with it. I think he'll like it. Now we're getting to the very end here and just adding the last bit on here, and then I'm going to go back and add in all those little dots. Now I did another card, and you'll see that in just a minute, where I used rectangles and triangles, and that worked very nicely too. Altenew has a triangle die set that made quick work of that. If you didn't want to do the math and create a triangle, or you can always just do them freehand, then you can just use a die if you'd like, if you happen to have it on hand. But almost everybody has circles on hand, so it works. Now, I heat embossed off camera a sentiment. This is from the Dad, My Favorite Things Dad stamp set. It has oodles of sentiments on there. This one I thought really fit my husband, so that's going on there. I heat embossed it onto black and then mounted it with foam tape. So here you are. Here's a close-up of it. And you can see all the detail and all the sparkles to it. It has a little bit of a galaxy planet feel to it, doesn't it? I think you'll like that too. And it kind of cascades up to that half moon. And then the next card that I have that I did, as I mentioned before, I did in blues and greens, and then I did it with some triangles and rectangles. This one doesn't have quite as many pieces to it, but it's the same principle. I will list the supplies for this one as well. You can see I did use a lot less embossing patterns. I think I used only 2 here. So you really can get away with whatever you want to do. This is a birthday card for my son-in-law, and I think he'll really enjoy that too. It's just a little bit unusual. I hope you learned something from it, or it inspired you to come up with your own creativity. If you did enjoy the video, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, we'd be over the moon if you would subscribe. And remember to pop over to the blog by clicking the link down below. It has oodles of inspiration, a complete supply list. And I want to thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.